Hey there, Mama. Welcome back to the Mom's Overcoming Overwhelm podcast, episode number 184. I'm Emily McDermott, and I'm here beside you on this journey as we work together to declutter your home, head, and heart. Have you ever felt overstimulated in motherhood? I know I do frequently. Have you ever felt ashamed when you yell at your kids again after you have reached the end of your rope in the midst of the chaos? Probably you have if you're here. Well, my friend KyAnn Molina has been there, and she learned how to build intentional rhythms in her day, which lightened her mental load and also brought flexible structure to her day. So in this episode, I talked to KyAnn. She is the host of the top 1% globally ranked podcast, Simple Rhythms for Busy Moms, also a wife and a mom of 3 kids 4 and under. And we're talking today about the important rhythms that can help us balance being present with our kids, living out our priorities, and managing our homes. And KyAnn helps busy moms create these intentional daily rhythms and systems to help them feel balanced in managing motherhood and homemaking. And she's very passionate about helping moms calm the chaos and grow in finding their identity in Christ, not their to-do list. And when she isn't coaching moms to help them to slow down and simplify, you can find her sipping on iced coffee pretty much any time of the year. I know that you will love this conversation, so what do you say? Grab that notebook and pen, and let's dive into today's conversation with KyAnn Molina. Hey there, Mama. Are you tired of all the stuff crowding your home, calendar, and mind? Do you wish you could say goodbye to the endless to-do list running around in your head? Want to declutter but don't know where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to Mom's Overcoming Overwhelm, where you will find proven and practical solutions to declutter your home, head, and heart. Hi, I'm Emily, a wife, boy mom, and simplicity seeker. I struggled to get pregnant and felt overwhelmed until I discovered decluttering could create the physical and emotional space I needed to become a mom. Now, 2 kids later, I've transformed my life in motherhood by developing simple systems around decluttering, capsule wardrobes, kid stuff, cleaning and tidying, meal planning, time management, and more, and I can't wait to share them with you. If you're ready to reclaim the time and energy you crave, be present with your kids, and finally enjoy the life and motherhood you so deserve, let's kick overwhelm to the curb, shall we? Grab your lukewarm coffee, your notebook and pen, and clear off some counter space. Let's do this. Well, hey, KyAnn, thanks so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. I'm thrilled to talk to you today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we were just talking about a lot of things that we have in common, just our journeys of motherhood and the women that we serve, that I know that all of you, as soon as you're done listening to this conversation, you need to go over to KyAnn's podcast because it is what we need in our lives to be able to have these simple rhythms, to be able to incorporate into our days so that we're not just surviving motherhood, but actually enjoying our lives. What a concept. So, before we jump into that, I would love it if you could introduce yourself and tell us about you and your family, how you serve moms, and then also anything you like to do for fun.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm KyAnn. I am a wife to my husband, Matt. We've been married for a little over 9 years now. We have 3 kids. We struggled with infertility for 3 years at the beginning of our marriage, and then we had 3 kids in 3 years somehow by the blessing of the Lord. So it is, the biggest blessing, and also, it can be a lot of chaos sometimes, like in all reality. My oldest just turned 5. And we are homeschooling. We just started homeschooling this year. We homestead. We have like a little backyard homestead, just a 1/4 acre city lot. But we have chickens and ducks and a big garden. We used to have dairy goats. We don't anymore. And then for fun, I mean, all of that is fun to me. Like the homesteading stuff, it's kind of like a passion for us. And then I love sourdough and cooking from scratch and stuff like that as well. So that's probably the fun side of my life, I guess. And then I'm a podcaster, so I share all about helping work from home moms to find routine in their days and implement intentional routines and rhythms to just get more done. It's like the balance of getting more done and also being present with your family. So that's a little bit of how I spend my days in this season currently.
Wow. I have whatever the opposite of a green thumb is. I have that. So I can't keep anything alive except for my children. I do okay job with that. But I just like love the concept of homesteading, but it
Yeah.
also would terrify me personally to attempt that. So
It's
I
a
think
learned
that it
skill. I did not have a green thumb before. So you know what? There's hope. You can do it.
Okay. Okay, cool. That yeah, definitely gives me encouragement. I would love it. You kind of alluded a little bit to some of your motherhood journey and what that has looked like, but I'm curious if there is a particular time in your motherhood. It could be right now, it could be years ago when you were feeling completely overwhelmed, either by, the what was going on in your home, or perhaps it was routines that weren't working, or just whatever it was as far as like the chaos that was going on. And
Yeah.
just kind of paint a picture of what was going on at the time, what was really that catalyst where you're like, okay, I can't take this anymore, like something needs to change. And then what did you do?
Yeah. Really, I think my mind goes back to the season of life that honestly, my business, my podcast, everything I do now was born out of, which I never in a million years saw coming. But as I said, we had kids really close together. So I found out I was pregnant with our second when I was 7 months postpartum. And another aspect of this is I have hyperemesis in all of my pregnancies. So I am sick the whole way through. And I have to be in the hospital every other day for about 4 hours a day to get infusions just to be able to manage somewhat. And so I think that was a big contributor as well. But after having my second, I really struggled with postpartum depression. My first two are 16 months apart. And I think the postpartum depression really opened my eyes to this level of chaos that I had kind of accepted as normal up until this point. So, another background information about this is I was struggling with a lot of workaholic tendencies too. I've always been an entrepreneur, and my husband and I had together been full-time entrepreneurs for over 5 years at that point. And I had never really done the work to intentionally establish those rhythms in our daily life to reflect our true priorities. So we had a successful business, like everything seemed great on the outside, but it was kind of a hot mess behind the scenes, like just really struggling with balance and even simple routines, like having the right ingredients when I go to make dinner so that I didn't go to make something and I have nothing that I need and I run to the store and suddenly, it took so much time to do all of that that I'm tired and we end up getting takeout instead, which defeated, the whole purpose. But I do think there is a specific morning that comes to mind that I've talked a few times about, and I can share that here if that's helpful. But like I mentioned, I had two kids under two for the first time, and I woke up with the baby crying. So it kind of felt like I would say waking up with the baby crying was a pretty normal thing, but this was a specific morning. It's kind of ingrained in my brain. So I woke up, I grabbed my toddler, and my baby needed to eat at the same time. So I walked down the hallway trying to nurse my baby. Sorry if that's TMI, but while I'm going to the kitchen to get my toddler breakfast because she's crying too because she's hungry. So we go into the kitchen and the counter is covered in the dishes from last night because I hadn't put them away. She's upset. Everyone's upset. So I'm like literally trying to feed my baby while I'm trying to wash one bowl with the one hand that I have available so that I can get her to stop crying, right? And this is probably why this is ingrained in my brain because my toddler, goes to the table where there was leftover dishes and she grabs a bowl of leftover spaghetti
Mhm.
and, spaghetti that is left out overnight, you would think has kind of like congealed and it's not as messy, right? Well, somehow that did not happen. So she grabs it and it went everywhere, like on the walls. There was a spot on the ceiling, like everywhere. Again, I don't know how, but again, this is probably why it's ingrained in my brain because it's a very drastic memory. And so I just remember at that moment, like losing it, if I'm being honest, like just losing it. Like I'm crying, my kids are crying. We were all yelling at the same time. Like you just hit that point where it's overstimulating, you're frustrated, and when you're overwhelmed kind of on a chronic level, like I was in that season, there's this trigger point that comes like this, and it's like it's just too much, and you
Yeah.
lose your cool completely. And so I think that for me was really the point that I realized something needed to change. Like, this is not the mom that I wanted to be. This is not the childhood experience. Like, this is not what I wanted my kids to grow up seeing, this angry version of me when something simple, I left the bowl on the table and my daughter grabbed it. It wasn't on her, and yet I'm mad in the moment, right? And so that kind of started me on a whole path of really reworking our routines, our daily habits. That's when I found the idea of rhythms in general and kind of went down this whole path of restructuring all of the daily things that sometimes just accidentally happen and you didn't intentionally set them up.
Yeah. I think that that's such a relatable story for the listeners here, especially because a lot of things are building up, right? You have the dishes, you have the trigger of the hungry kids. Then you
Mhm.
have the trigger of like that one kind of extra tipping point type
Yeah.
of trigger that just like sends you over the edge. In this case, the mess with the spaghetti. And what I have found in my motherhood journey is that my first reaction is to, was, I should say, most of the time was to yell at the kid
Yeah.
because it's just kind of like, oh, yeah, how did this happen?
Yeah.
But internally, I'm feeling shame that I let everything in the environment get to that point, that there was even the spaghetti out there in the first place for
Right.
that to happen, and then it's sort of that mom shame of, okay, well, if I could just get my act together, if I could just be on top of this, I wouldn't be the one that's here yelling at my kid right now. So I feel like it's definitely sort of that build up over time. And for you to have that moment, kind of like, okay, something has to change here. And it's more than just the bowl of spaghetti needs to be in the sink. Like
Right.
it's more,
Yes.
there's sort of like the root, part of it.
Mhm.
And so what did that kind of developing intentional rhythms, like kind of once you realized that something needed to change, what did that look like? And why do you think, as overwhelmed moms that feel like we can't possibly take on anything else on our mental load, how can we start to incorporate some of these concepts when it comes to building an intentional rhythm in our homes and our lives?
Yeah. I think the first thing to start with is explaining what rhythms really means. I feel like
Hmm.
that gives us a good idea of what I'm talking about. So to me, rhythms really give us like a loose structure and framework to go through every day to really make sure that those important things are happening in our day-to-day lives without having to consciously decide the same things, like to do those same things over and over every single day. Because when you're making all of those little tiny decisions, like what do we eat for breakfast, when do I do the laundry? When do I do the dishes? When do I plan my kid's birthday party? All of these different things, they add up in our brains. And it feels to me like a internet browser is an example I give a lot with like 50 tabs loading at the
Yeah.
same time. I'm probably exposing myself by saying that sometimes I do have 50 tabs open at once. Okay. So I've experienced this, but when you have them all loading and then you inevitably get to this like spinning wheel of death where it's just loading,
Mhm.
loading, loading, nothing is happening. That's what our brains feel like when we're making those decisions all the time because your brain just freezes and you feel paralyzed, you're overwhelmed, and you have no idea where to start. You know something's out of whack, but you don't know what to change. And so
Yeah.
putting these rhythms into place helps to take that out of our head and into actual systems and rhythms that can flow with our life. Instead of just adding all these other items to our to-do list, it makes it manageable to do in the different seasons that we're in. So practical examples of what this looks like with the home management side, because it's kind of a balance for me of both being present with my family, living out my priorities, and also managing my home
Yeah.
is a way that I explain it a lot. So home management wise, this could be, having tidy anchor points throughout the day to tidy up in small pockets of time so it's not getting out of control. Like a laundry, having a
Mhm.
laundry system. For me, I keep the basket really small because I do the laundry every time that basket fills up. So I have a visual reminder and I don't go get a bigger basket because I want to force myself to
Yeah.
do it regularly, right? Planning, having a weekly planning meeting on Sundays so that we don't run out of the ingredients that we need. I place our grocery order during that time. I do our weekly meal planning, all of that. So that's taken care of. So I'm not coming to this point where I go to get the ingredients and I don't have what I need and we have to run to the store every single night that week to just get one more thing. That
Mhm.
might just be me, but that is like the worst to me when I have to run to the store with three small children to get one ingredient. No, we're not doing that. So then on the other side of like investing in our family, this could be, or for us, some of what it looks like is having a family Sabbath every week that we do together. Getting outside first thing in the morning. This is great for scientifically, like vitamin D benefits, all of that. But also, it gives me a few minutes to connect with my kids, to get outside in nature. We talk about the trees. My kids are still pretty little, so we talk about all of that, like the little things that they notice. But also, it slows me down to instead of just like rushing into the day, I sit out there with them. They're still in their pajamas. I might take my coffee out there and we have a few minutes to just check in first, kind of on a heart level. And even the weekly meeting that I do with my husband that I mentioned with the grocery shopping, we
Mhm.
also incorporate a time where we check in with each other. So we communicate, get on the same page as far as what the week holds, but we also have a bunch of intentional questions, not a bunch, a few of them that we ask each other to kind of check in and make sure that we're not just doing life side by side, but we're really saying, "Hey, how can we be praying for each other this week? How is your heart doing? What is something you're proud of yourself for?" Different things like that to get to that deeper aspect. And so if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Like that's something
Mhm.
that a lot of people talk about, but I've really found that if I don't have these systems in place, it just doesn't happen. And so rhythms are those systems for me to kind of, they're almost like guardrails, is kind of
Yeah.
how I explain it too, to make sure that I'm carving out time to get done what needs to get done. There is a reality too. We have things that have to happen every day. And also to make sure these bigger picture priorities, like my marriage, my faith, connecting with my kids, not just being with them 24/7, but not looking in their eyes and actually having quality time with them to make sure that both of those things are happening at the same time. So I think it does take slowing down enough. That was one of the things for me to like slow down enough to actually look at my life as a whole, to figure out what my priorities are, and then to do the work to actually implement those small little habits. They're not huge,
Yeah.
small little habits over time that add up to so much more than you think. There's a verse, I don't know what the quote is at the moment, or what the reference is at the moment, but it says, "Ponder the path of your feet, and your ways will be made sure." And to me, that's kind of what rhythms are, is it's taking the time to take that bigger picture, like that zoomed out view of your life, instead of just going from fire to fire to fire all day
Mhm.
long, looking at it as a whole and saying, okay, what really matters here? Like, how many times have we said we want to start reading more with our kids, or maybe going on walks more, or going on more dates with our husband? It could be a myriad of examples. But then we say, we'll focus on that after we get through this season or after we finish this project for work or whatever it may be. And it just kind of keeps getting pushed down the road. So I think
Yeah.
rhythms and systems, it kind of helps you to be proactive and intentional instead of just reacting every day. And maybe, like my example, maybe not responding in the way that you would like because you've been so caught in that urgency mode of just tending to all the fires when they're happening.
Yeah, and you gave some really amazing examples there, and I was trying to think of other ones that have really been small things that have had a huge return on investment, I guess, in my day to
Mhm.
day. And one of the things that came to mind to me is that probably 6 months ago or so, I started always running the dishwasher at night and
Mm,
unloading it in the morning.
yeah.
Regardless, normally we have like a 75% or more full dishwasher.
Yeah.
My kids just go through glasses all the time, I guess. I don't know. But just that simple thing where it's that I just know when I've cleaned up from dinner, I'm starting the dishwasher, and I know in the morning while my kids are having breakfast, I unload,
Yeah.
means that one of my huge stressor points, which is dishes in the sink, which I can't
Mm,
stand,
hmm.
like I don't have that. I don't, like you said, I don't have to ask myself, when am I doing the dishes? Like that does
Right.
not come into my mind. And then that allows me to just go and focus on the other things that I want to accomplish in my life. And that's just taken care of. Or I know that I'm doing laundry on a daily basis because I decided a long time ago that works the best for our family. And
Right.
there's no decision to be made.
Yeah.
It's just a rhythm. So when it comes to deciding for the overwhelmed, overstimulated, stressed out mom, where she wants to start because she can see around her all of these things that are not working and all of these things that need her attention.
Yeah.
Where would you recommend, kind of on the list that you were giving, or maybe another one where maybe kind of 2 to 3 rhythms that she could start with that don't seem like such huge hurdles to get over, that can
Yeah.
really start to have that quick win return on investment for her time?
Yeah. I think it is specific to each person, and there's kind of like a framework that I usually take people through to figure out the areas that are most stressful to you. So there is some nuance to that of looking at where the root of your overwhelm is. So that's usually the first step that I do, but I can give a few examples of some of the ones that I feel like have made the most impact over time, to give people some starting places on
Yeah.
things that they could tactically include. So one of them is planning my days the night before. And This sounds really simple. When you put it into practice, it changes actually a lot in your day. When you just sit down the night before to take 5 to 10 minutes to think through what is on your calendar. I'll go ahead, I'll just briefly tell you exactly how I do this. I have kind of a whole system that I do. And the first piece of it that I'll say before I do the practical part is starting the day praying for wisdom to know what is top priority for that day and discernment to set the rest aside. And I know that's not practical and like this is how you set up the to-do list type thing, but this really is kind of the foundation for me because we can very easily put 767 things on our to-do list and then inevitably our kid will get sick or we have to go help a family member, a car breaks down. I don't know. Like it could be literally anything. You have all sorts of things that are on your list and then something derails you essentially. And then you feel like you didn't get anything accomplished. You feel like a failure. And so when I am starting the day, taking this to the Lord first and saying, hey, you know how much time I have today, and you know what needs to be my top priority today, even if that looks very different than what I think it does, that has just given me, I think, a heart posture of just living with open hands to what my plans are and knowing that God's plans may be different. And that just helps me to respond and more patience and grace
Mhm.
than just being as reactive in the moment. So that's the first thing. And then after that, I always tell people to go ahead and brain dump out in a notes app on your phone, on a physical piece of paper, write everything out that you think you need to do. Even if you can't accomplish it all, write it out, get it out of your head, then you're going to go back through and you're going to first move the things. You're going to try your best to know how much you can realistically do in a day. This is something that I think is a skill you get better at as you practice it. But
Mhm.
do your best to estimate how much do I think I can really get accomplished today with the circumstances that I have today, the appointments, whatever. Move all the rest of the items to like a brain dump list. Again, there's systems to do all of this, but this is just to give you a starting step. So
Yeah.
just start a note in your phone that says brain dump. So then you can come back to it. You know it's written down. You're not going to forget it because I think often we can get stressed out about that we're going to forget it and never think about it again.
Mhm.
Then you're going to go back through your list that you have for the day and you're going to have like daily to-do list at the top and then a break and you're going to put top three and you're going to pick the top three items to focus on from that list. If you could only accomplish three things, what would it be? Go ahead and put those in there and then have a break again and then have the rest of your list for the day. And what that does is it really gives you a visual reminder of, hey, this is what I want to focus on first. So when I have a few minutes, let's focus on that first. Those are highest priority. Cross those off, and then you can do the next thing. It just really helps your brain to kind of get that dopamine hit of knowing prioritization is like one of the biggest things. That's what people struggle with a lot. And I struggle with this too until I set these systems into place, like not knowing what's most important. And so if you can give yourself those few minutes to really think through it the night before, I think it helps you to remove yourself enough. Because if you do it morning of, it's almost like you're already in it. And so you're like, oh man, I gotta rush, 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 and hurry, hurry. But the night before, you're removed enough that you can kind of think logically about it. So that's one of the first things. And then I'll briefly go over the other ones that I have really quickly. A weekly meeting with my husband. I think I mentioned that already. And so what we do this on Sunday afternoons. You could do it at any time. Totally depends on what your schedule, what you prefer. But we sit down, we go over our budget briefly. That doesn't usually take very long. And then I make a weekly meal plan. And then from there, I take the dinner items and I add all of the ingredients that I need to a grocery order list. And then I have a staple grocery list. So they kind of go hand in hand. And that is everything that I need in my pantry regularly, as well as like breakfast and lunch. Breakfast and lunch we do on repeat. Like we do the same things. And so I have that on my staple grocery list. And it helps me to, when I'm meal planning, I just need to plan out the dinners. I plug in the nights we're not going to be home, plug in dinners for the rest, add the ingredients to my grocery list, and check my staple grocery list. So I can just go through my pantry and my fridge and see what I'm missing. So
Yeah.
I'm not running out of just basic things, flour, whatever, sugar that you need. And it doesn't take very long at all to do that. And then I place a grocery order. Grocery order is like the best thing in the world to me. And I prioritize that because, in a season of little kids and stuff, you can just go pick it up. It's so simple. So we do that. And then we have a few minutes at the end where I said we kind of go through a few questions and
Mhm.
just connect with each other and talk. And it's kind of like a placeholder in our week where, if nothing else, we have these few minutes to just talk a little deeper than you can do. We do it during nap time so the kids aren't running around. But those are kind of a few things that come to mind for me to start with. But my best encouragement is to start small.
Yeah.
Like, I think we can really minimize the impact that small changes make over time. The 1% More rule by James Clear
Mhm.
says if you get 1% better every day for a year, you end up 37 times better in a year versus if you don't if you just stay this, like you decline down to zero if you make
Yeah.
no changes. And so just focus on 1% more each day. Focus in on one specific area and just keep going until you feel like you're in a good rhythm. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is just going all in, but doing too much at once. Like we don't have to burn the whole house down to start.
Yes, so true. And one of the things that you mentioned, just as far as like, not starting the day in that reactive mode where you're like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, everything's going on. Just sort of, I love being able to look at my calendar for the next day. And a lot of times there's things on there I forgot about
Yeah.
or
Right.
forgot exactly what time they were happening. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm talking to KyAnn at this time. I thought it
Yeah.
was this time.
Yes.
So just to kind of confirm that in your brain, because one of the things that I learned is that, when you wake up in the morning, your cortisol levels tend to be high. And then when you are bombarded with, kids and demands, and we check our phones and, there are notifications and everything else,
Yeah.
then we're just ramping up that stress level. So if we have done a little bit of prep work the night before to be like, okay, I know what's going on tomorrow, or maybe it's Sunday night. So, and I also know kind of what the week is going to look like and what I can expect, then we can at least start the day kind of with that knowledge instead
Yeah.
of just like our feet hit the ground and then we're immediately in that reactive mode, because
Yes.
that's what we're trying to get out of the reactive mode
Yeah.
and go a little bit more into proactive mode without it having to be like all or nothing.
Yes. Yes. 100% agree.
Yeah. So you and I have talked about our stories when it comes to overstimulation. Specifically, I realized fairly quickly in my motherhood the lack of sleep, coupled with some of these other things, recognizing that I'm very sensitive to touch, sensitive to noise. I'm sensitive to caffeine. Like I'm sensitive to all of these things, and learned about HSP, or highly sensitive person, and kind of how that played into my motherhood, especially when my kids were, well, they're still loud, let's be honest, but when they were, I have two boys that are super loud, but when they were younger and it was more of the being touched out,
Yeah.
or that there was just like the tantrums and the screaming, and my kids were very physical with me, and I struggled a lot until I was able to figure out some coping mechanisms and also some medication shifts that were able to help me. But I was just curious, just sort of like in the seasons that you've had, because you still have quite young kids, where there is that overstimulation and that overwhelm, like some of the coping mechanisms, I guess, that you've been able to use. We talked about planning, which is a huge
Mhm.
one, but any other coping mechanisms that's helped you to deal with sort of the physical realities of having this overstimulation around you, because kids are just being kids at
Yeah.
that age?
Right. Yeah. And I think those overstimulation moments, that's almost always when I got to that reactive place, like we talked
Mm,
about earlier, where I just felt like I wasn't being the mom that I wanted to be. I didn't want to be an angry mom and reactive and all of that. And it can be a lot when we have kids running around and all this extra noise and just all the different sensory elements, right?
yeah.
Some of that we can control, some of it we can't. But I do think that we have more control in setting ourselves up in how we respond. There are some elements that we can really do to shift that. And so I really like to start with addressing kind of that chronic overwhelm piece of it first. And so I have kind of 5 steps that I talk about to stop the chronic overwhelm in motherhood. Of course, we're not I wish I could solve overwhelm in general in motherhood, but it's more so like that chronic overwhelm where you're more overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed more often than you're not. And that's the space that we don't want to stay there, staying in survival mode. So, as far as the overstimulation, the first two things, like in the moment, if I am in a moment where it is very overstimulating, the first thing I talk about a lot is cutting out the noise. So when
Mhm.
there is a lot happening, even now, my natural reaction still is to want to numb out by when I was on social media, I'm not anymore. It would be to scroll on social media or even to put on a podcast or like a TV show on my phone or something while I did dishes, like in the background. Really just to distract myself from the
Yeah.
moment and to kind of get away from it. And so consistently forcing myself in those moments to not put anything extra on to add to the overwhelm and noise levels, that helps so much. So it's kind of a rule that I keep in mind for myself now. I will occasionally put on like worship music really
Mhm.
quietly, and that's about the only thing. Like I don't do anything else because I need to like recenter and get back in control at that moment and not put on more noise to just like further create more problems
Mhm.
essentially. The second thing is to get outside. So this is a very simple thing to do, but I either get outside or just add water. It's something I heard a long time ago. So the getting outside is pretty self-explanatory. In the moment, I will literally go outside myself. I might sit on the porch for literally like 2 minutes, just get some sun in my eyes, just reset. Sometimes that's all I need. It might be loading my kids up and going for a walk around just down the street really quickly. We've done that a lot of times. It could be just going in the backyard and change the scenery. We're all going to go play in the backyard and I'll sit back there, read a book, do whatever. So that's kind of the outside part. Sometimes, like, that really does help to just kind of reset, to snap out of it in the moment and just go outside for a few minutes. Another thing, especially I think with little kids, I heard a long time ago, I don't remember where, but they were like, when you are struggling with overstimulation, just add water. And I was like, what in the heck does that mean? But they were talking about like, go give your kids a bath, which I know sounds so silly, but in the middle of the day, go put your kids in the bathtub. You can get the little paints out that they have, put them in there. You can read a book while you sit on the toilet or sit on your stool in the bathroom. It gives you kind of a break because kids love to play with water, and it gives everyone, this can be if your kids are struggling too, like just having a meltdown or tantrum, or it could be getting like a water sensory activity set up. We use that as a tool where you just set out a mat. I mean, we really just use like a Tupperware container and whatever scoops I can find in my kitchen. It's not sensory activity sometimes makes it seem like it has to be all this prep. It's very simple. It does not need to be a big thing. Or maybe it's even going to take a shower yourself, I don't know, in the middle of the day and just reset, you know? Some of those things, sometimes you just need that break for a few minutes to just snap out of it and kind of change the scenery. And then a couple rhythms really quick to be proactive in helping with this overstimulation day to day in general. The first one is putting my phone in a drawer for the first hour and the last hour of the day. When you mentioned it earlier as well, but when you're not starting the day being bombarded with notifications and social media scrolling and seeing this email that you need to respond to and letting that kind of set the tone, this alone really helps you to free up that mental space and allows you to be more present kind of in the moment so that you don't feel behind before your feet even hit the ground, right?
Mhm.
The second one is making it a priority to spend 15 minutes of fully focused, intentional time with my kids every single day. And so this varies on how we spend it every day. But it could be reading books together, it could be going on a walk, letting them pick out a fun game. It changes every single day. But just having 15 minutes to really be there in the moment. And that seems so small, but how often, even those of us that are stay-at-home moms or work from home moms, have we been home with our kids for the full day and we realized at the end of the day that we actually didn't have any time, that we were fully like there, not just trying to
Yeah.
get something else done around the house or trying to get something done for work, but really like connecting with them. And then the last thing is waking up at least 15 minutes before my kids. This has been huge for me in motherhood and managing overstimulation, just kind of getting out of that fight or flight response where you feel like just reactive to everything. And I think sometimes people think you have to get up like 2 hours before in order to make this happen. You can start really small, like 10 to 15 minutes makes a huge difference without waking up with little people like tugging on you or crying and needing you. And that's kind of what sets the tone for your day. Just prioritizing a little bit of time for yourself to kind of wake up on your own, get your heart in the right place before everyone else does. That does so much to set my day up right. So I have a morning routine guide that people can
Mhm.
get in my Facebook community, and it really walks you through like how to set up a morning routine that actually serves you in the season that you're in, even if you have kids that don't sleep through the night, kind of some of
Yeah.
the practicals of how to make that work. So yeah, those are the things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, that is so incredibly helpful. And some of those things I've already implemented. Other things were good reminders. One of the things, I don't know on Androids, but on iPhone, they have like the accessibility features. So if you click 3 times, it turns red, the screen.
Oh, uh-huh.
So the reason that that's helpful is a lot of times I do read the Bible before bed and I do the Bible recap on the
Uh-huh.
app, but then I don't want to be like on my phone.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of like put that so that we have sort of the dimmed light and then it's not like the bright
Mm.
light in my
Yeah.
face, to be able to have sort of that red light that's a little bit better for your brain
Yeah.
before
That's
you
a
go to
great idea.
sleep. So that was like one of the things where ideally the phone would be completely gone, but that if I am going to use the phone, I'm going to make sure it's not keeping me up because it has to go back, like you said, to the sort of like that cortisol load. Like, what are
Yeah.
we trying to do? We're trying to calm our bodies down in the morning. We're trying to not have our cortisol spiking because we're being reactive to our kids waking us up, which, side note, glad my kid woke me up today because otherwise they would have missed the bus.
Oh no.
Somehow I was sleeping in a lot today and I was like, oh, okay. I'm actually kind of glad that you woke me up. But anyway, just kind of like you said, it doesn't have to be this 2 hour. We're doing these, hour-long devotionals with like the
Yeah.
sun streaming through the window at 5 a.m. Like, no, that's not
Yeah.
practical for most moms. So
Right.
I'll definitely make sure to link to your Facebook group so that people can grab that morning routine guide. And speaking of which, can you let everyone know the best way that they can connect with you so they can learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to find me is the podcast. It's called Simple Rhythms for Busy Moms. So you can find that, anywhere that you are listening to this podcast, anywhere podcasts are played. And we really talk about how to simplify your daily routines for more time with your family. So really just more in depth on everything we talked about here with intentional systems and boundaries to simplify and organize your life, to take all of that out of your head and put it into actual systems to help you slow down, be productive, but also to be present. So I would love for any of your listeners to come say hi and to come listen. And then the second place I hang out most, I mentioned already, but is my free Facebook community.
Mhm.
So I'm in there every day, and it's really just a bunch of like-minded moms that are trying to balance motherhood and home, faith, maybe a business on the side. And we do a lot of challenges in there, like quiet time challenges or waking up before your kids, screen time challenges, things like that to help us actually be accountable and have that community kind of accountability to do all of this together. It just makes it a lot more doable. So yeah, I have the free morning routine download in there if your listeners come join, but you can find that at bit.ly/simple rhythms community.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all of that in the show notes. So thank you so much, KyAnn. This was such a great conversation. Really appreciate you and everything that you're doing for the overwhelmed mamas out there. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you like today's podcast, here's what you can do. Just take 30 seconds to leave me a review. I know you're a busy mama. You're overwhelmed, in fact. But 30 seconds of your day makes such an impact. I'll be blessed by your words. They'll definitely make my day. And who knows, you might be entered for this month's giveaway. In Apple Podcasts, scroll down to write a review. Thanks so much for your time. I'm so grateful for you.